All right, indeed, stocks are up across the board. All the major averages running along here, including the S&P, the Dow, NASDAQ, all of that. The S&P, a string of performances, the likes of which we've not seen in better than 20 years. We'll have more on that in a second, but we might have gotten a push to this with Speaker Paul Ryan wrapping up some remarks earlier on in Maryland, where he was actually pushing for tax cuts. The House approved a budget sort of plan of their own that they're kicking to the Senate to come up with their own. But in the course of his remarks, besides pushing for tax cuts that look like a better thing right now, he did earlier talk about the need to look into this so-called bump stock mechanism that can allow a semi-automatic weapon to become an automatic weapon, the kind used by the assailant in the Las Vegas killings case. Stephen Paddock had a lot of these gizmos, and now even the NRA is saying, you know what, we got to look into that. By the way, speaking of Paddock, we're now learning, by the way, that Las Vegas wasn't the only city in his sights. Apparently, he visited concert locations in Chicago and in Boston, checking out hotels near Fenway Park at a Lollapalooza event in Chicago. So he was busy. What was he looking for? What was he up to? What was he doing? Trace Gallagher in Las Vegas with more on that. Hey, Trace.
Hey, Neil, the big question in all of this is whether Stephen Paddock was acting alone, and the Clark County Sheriff seems to believe that he was not. The sheriff has not put forth any evidence to back up that claim, but the sheriff said, quoting, that he would be Superman to have pulled this off alone. We know in the days running up to the attack at the Mandalay Bay Hotel that Stephen Paddock was gambling an awful lot, 7-8 hours a day, and there were witnesses now saying that Stephen Paddock had a female companion with him for a lot of that time, and police are now in the process of trying to track down that female companion. That was not his girlfriend, by the way. His girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, of course, was interviewed for 5.5 hours yesterday by the FBI. They didn't reveal anything of what came out of those interviews, but her lawyer came out and said later that she knew nothing about the attack, that she called Stephen Paddock a kind and gentle man, and she did acknowledge that he sent her $100,000 to the Philippines. She said it was to buy a house, and she thought at the time that he was breaking up with her. There does seem to be a pattern, as you mentioned off the top of the show, Neil, of him pre-surveilling what might be possible alternative targets. We have just confirmed that he did, in fact, book a room at a hotel overlooking Grant Park in Chicago during the time of the Lollapalooza concert, which Malia Obama was in attendance. The Blackstone Hotel says that he did not show up for the Lollapalooza concert, but I'm quoting here, says, quote, we can confirm that a reservation was made under the name Stephen Paddock. However, authorities have not confirmed that this is the same person as the Las Vegas shooter, but separately, the Chicago Police Department has now confirmed that it was, in fact, the same person who pulled off the Las Vegas shooting. I want to, if I can, tell you also that in Las Vegas, in downtown, the week before this concert shooting happened at Mandalay Bay, there was another hotel room booked at a downtown hotel that overlooked a Life is Beautiful concert. Police have now confirmed that Stephen Paddock booked a hotel room there. And if I quickly can just clarify the timeline of the shooting, because there seems to be a confusion in this, Neil. The actual shooting here down on the concert goers lasted almost exactly 10 minutes. The police arrived up on the 32nd floor somewhere between 9 and 11 minutes. And I want you to listen to this natural sound of kind of the radio traffic of what was going on while they were searching for the active shooter floor. Watch.
I'm inside the Mandalay Bay on the 31st floor. I can hear the automatic fire coming from one floor ahead, one floor above us.
I have a gunshot victim at gate 4. Gunshot to the leg. Okay, we can't worry about victims. We need to stop the shooter before we have more victims. Anybody have eyes on this shooter?
So the gunshot victim, the one gunshot to the leg, that was a security guard, and he may be the hero, a big hero in all this, Neil, because when he was shot, he came down the hallway, he approached Stephen Paddock's room, Paddock strafed the door, shot him one time in the leg, and he continued to help police locate that room. When police finally got there, there was no more shooting. It had stopped. So the theory being that he was either looking for a place to escape or he put the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger, but that's what the timeline is, and it took another 72 minutes for SWAT to go in the room, and the reason it took so long is because at that point in time it was no longer an active shooter, it was a barricade situation, and when they finally went in, they found the suspect on the floor with a gunshot wound to his head. Neil.
But Trace, any time within that hour, he could have killed himself. They're just not exactly sure when, right?
Anytime within that hour. And the sheriff had said yesterday, surprised all of us, saying he thought that Stephen Paddock was actually trying to escape. He believes that he was looking for a way out, which was surprising to everybody. So anytime in that hour, but again, there was no shot. After the security guard caught the bullet in the leg, the shooting stopped. Neil.
Thank you, my friend. Excellent reporting, as always. Trace Gallagher in Vegas. All right, Steve Rogers is now a former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Steve, always good to have you. Here's what also feeds that argument that he actually planned on leaving there alive. He had a car filled with this ammonium nitrate, which is a fertilizer-type explosive, could be used for that. He had 1,600 rounds of ammunition. He also had a lot of cases of explosives that you can easily detonate just by shooting at it. So he was planning something else. There was going to be something else to do after this. What do you think of all that?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure in the mind of many investigators, Neil, that he had planned to do something. As the sheriff said, they've concluded he planned to escape. Had he escaped, maybe, just maybe, escaped undetected, some of those hotels that he visited prior to this incident in Las Vegas, he may have gone back there, and we would have had another massive massacre on our hands.
You know, this Chicago scoping out this Lollapalooza event, that's more like pop rock music versus the country music at this venue. That shoots the theory. I'm sorry for the crass pun here, but that he was after a country music crowd then, right? I mean, he was just after crowds in that event.
Well, Neil, I find one thing very attractive that this shooter may have thought to himself would cause mass casualties, those gas tanks. He probably surveyed all of these hotels and said, you know, I could blow the living daylights out of this area. So that's maybe one reason why he picked that venue.
Was there also something to the notion that maybe let you skip out on a Chicago, because if he was carrying all these weapons around, let's say he was going to drive or fly, certainly flying with all those weapons would catch people's attention as it would driving that far with him, right?
Well, yeah, we don't know, Neil. It is a bit of a mystery how he got all those weapons into the hotel. But the fact of the matter is, and I would agree with the sheriff, who's done an extraordinary job, there had to be someone else involved, not necessarily in the operation and execution phase, but in the planning stage. And that's where they're going to focus their investigation on, the planning stage. Was anyone else involved? Does anyone else have any knowledge?
All right, so just to be clear, you're saying it's not so much help on the shooting itself, on the attack on that night, but preparing for that. Many have also talked, Steve, about the idea, a 64-year-old guy carting all of this stuff, handling all these weapons. They heat up very fast. They could be very exhausting just to, shoot one after the other. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's one of those, Neil, it's one of those mysteries. You talk to criminal profilers and psychologists, they're all scratching their heads. But no doubt in my mind, and in the mind as the sheriff has concluded, that someone else knows something. And that someone else will bring us to the motive.
Now, a lot we don't know about that hour after the shooting. Let's say we're around 10:20 now, local time. Shooting's over. They don't barge into his room and find him dead in there until about an hour later. All sorts of debate back and forth. Did he kill himself early in the hour right away? Was he surrounded? Did he sense that the end was near? Or did he linger? They heard no noise. They heard nothing to indicate that he was still active in that room. But so much we don't know there. What do you think?
Well, let's talk about what happened during that period of time. The police had to make sure, Neil, that there were no other potential victims. So when they get in that building, they have to protect people, number one. Number two, what's more serious to the police are booby traps. They had no idea if we're dealing with one shooter, two shooters. They had no idea if this guy had IEDs planted in the hallways. So this is why it took them the time necessary in order to get in that room. And, I mean, Neil, you could imagine breaking the door down and a bomb going off. So they had to be absolutely sure that that area was secure before they breached that door.
Yeah, and the guy who was shot at, who was still telling the authorities there, this is the room, this is the guy, and he's bleeding like crazy. Talk about brave. Steve, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Neil.
All right, the city's mayor, Calvin Goodman, on what any of this means right now, this threat or this feeling that he was looking at other sites, locations, and that the body count could have been significantly higher by a factor of 5, 6, even tenfold after this. All right, live shot of Las Vegas right now. A week ago today, that if you think about it, the killer arrived. Stephen Paddock arrived in the city, and then of course what would transpire just days later. Las Vegas Mayor Carolyn Goodman, probably the longest week of her life, joins you right now. Mayor, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for caring and letting us have more time to get the words out of what a great country this is and what a caring, wonderful community, and our hearts and prayers to those we've lost and those still injured.
You know, I know you had a chance to be with the president yesterday, Mayor, and he was marveling at just the bravery of a lot of not only your rescue folks and but those in the hospital, including the one guy who just had to get up and stand to greet the president. It's changed people's perception of Las Vegas. Has it changed yours?
No, because I think of the 18 years that my husband and I have been lucky enough to serve in this community, we've always known, number one, this is a great place to live. It's so exciting to be here, but our one priority, number one, has always been the safety and security of our entire area, and that's what we're about, is making it safe and making people feel comfortable here. You know, we have 43 million visitors a year.
Oh, I know.
And it's a place for, it's wonderful, but safety has always been of concern, and so both he and I have taken the federal training, and of course everybody here, we know what our role is in case of an emergency or a natural disaster, and so we just really feel that's our job.
Well, you do it well, Mayor, all of you, both parties. I am curious, though, man, what you make of these latest developments on the shooter, Stephen Paddock, that he might have also been scoping out Chicago, Boston as well, and the luck of the draw would have it, your fine city. What do you make of that, and what his intent was? Some people said maybe by targeting a conservative or country music crowd, maybe that was a crowd he was after, and that didn't seem to jibe with the crowd that he was targeting, or potentially could have targeted in Chicago at a rock concert. So what do you make of what he was up to?
Well, you know, I think, Neil, the most important thing is to work on facts and not what ifs and maybe. So as soon as we know a fact is corroborated as being a real, honest-to-goodness piece of information, that's the first thing. Of course, unfortunately or fortunately for me, my master's is in counseling, and I think we will never know this. You don't know if it's a reaction to his father. I'm learning more from what you're covering and what everybody else is covering that, of course, we had no idea about. I would think anybody that knew him or lived with him would have to know more, unless he had hired and rented a separate place to go work on his devious scheming,
right.
Or put his belongings. So it's impossible that people who knew him well and were related to him, unless they hadn't seen him in 10 years in his environment, wherever that would be. So as I hear these things about the potential of what could have happened somewhere else for those communities, God bless them that they are still fine and it didn't happen there. Yeah. As for us, when I hear, you know, I wanted to hear from the Ogden, yes, the rooms were reserved in his name. I've not heard that specifically. The same was Chicago, but we do know our life is beautiful. Instead, that's what we're about. You know, we're a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week town. We have the best convention business, and we have just such a wonderful group of people who live here, who handle 350,000 people a week coming through, and we want them.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Do you think it will change, though? The reason why I mentioned it, Robin Leach, who's one of your favorite local citizens, had told me yesterday that he thinks that a lot of outdoor events and venues, and I know your local business press has been writing about this, that those are not going to be as popular, are not going to be as pushed as much, that the casino crowds will still be the casino crowds, but these outdoor venue events, maybe not as many. What do you think?
You know, no, I think we're a very safe place, and we do things, crowd control. We had wonderful representation of law enforcement and first responders there. This could have been so much worse, and as tragic as it was horrible. But the reality is, whatever we do here, I know the eyes of the world are upon us. They're going to have to do it in their communities. And we certainly, all of us who tend to fly around the world or fly around the country, know what happened after 9/11 11 with the restrictions at the airports. Now, we cannot live a life like this. We cannot be penalized by those who are evil people. We cannot change how we love to live and want to do things and be a part of this world and seize the day every day of our lives. No, we cannot. I have always felt, after going through the training myself, and you only can know it when it's personal to you, that we really know what we're doing here. It has been safe all this time. I don't know, because I don't talk with them every single day at the Fusion Center, the FBI. How many things have they stopped?
Casino CEOs, Mayor, who I know at the case of the Wynn, and this might be just an immediate aftermath of this event, they are screening luggage. I don't know if they're using magnetometers, but that process has already begun. Now, whether it continues or others follow it at the Bellagio and elsewhere, I have no idea. But do you worry about that, or is this just going to be the adjustment you make after something horrific happens?
Well, you would know, Neil, these are privately owned hotels, so what they're going to do, they may call different aspects of government and ask, what would you do? Something may be suggested. We are learning right now from Boston and what happened after the Boston Marathon. I've been talking with Mayor Dyer in Orlando with Pulse. I've been talking with Governor Malloy, who was part of the Sandy Hook tragedy, and how that was handled. You learn from those who've gone before you how you can do something and go through your checklist. Did we do this right? But our concentration is, unless they want to handicap and handcuff every one of us, every human being in the United States, and say, in order that you've got less probably than 100 people all over this country of 350 million plus that have affected this horror, all these horrors that we've been dealing with, are you going to let them make life miserable for everybody else? I don't think so. And I'm just, all I can do is what my part is, and my part is to make sure that we at the city are doing everything we can to do what we're assigned to do in this safety mode. And I think with everybody else doing it, that's why we were able to contain this and get it done, because we have law enforcement. But the thing we can't control is the magnificence of all these selfless heroes that were out there that are wanting to protect their lives, their loved ones, and even people they don't know. They will not tolerate anything taking them down and making this a country where you are restricted in everything you do and somebody's watching every moment of your life. Won't happen.
Oh, they are your proudest achievements, Mayor. Thank you very, very much. Very good talking to you.
Thanks for having us back. We really appreciate it, and thanks for all your support and caring and getting the word out. This is a great country, and we are very proud here to be part of it, and our prayers and sympathies continue with those who've been stricken and for those we lost.
Right back at you, Mayor. Thank you very, very much. Be well, be strong, but
thank you.
You already are. All right.
Thank you.
In the meantime, we've got another tropical storm forming. This one's Nate. It's heading toward the Gulf. A whole bunch of refineries, oil, gas rigs in its path. And a number of major energy companies are taking the precaution of shutting those refineries down, which could mean whether you're in the path of this or not, guess what? You're going to be paying for it. We're on it. And I mean all over it after this. All right, remember Maria? Now get used to Nate slamming Central America, said to get sights on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Rick Reichmuth has been keeping a close eye on this one. What are we looking at here, bud?
Well, we're looking at a very strong tropical storm. It looks like possibly a hurricane. Don't think we're talking about a major hurricane, which is certainly good news, but that amount of moisture across that area is certainly going to cause some problems. Right now, it's across parts of kind of Nicaragua and towards Honduras and over land, so not strengthening at all. It's going to continue to pull off towards the north here. As it does, it's going to bring a lot of rain here in towards Central America. Some spots may be up towards 20 inches, and we're concerned about landslides here. Rainfall, once we get towards the U.S., is going to be a little bit lower than a traditional tropical storm just because it's going to be moving very quickly. So expect to see some 4 to 8 inch range. I will tell you, it is moving very close to where a lot of the oil refineries are, and that is certainly problematic, unlike what we saw with Irma. Now this storm here across parts of the Central Gulf and off of the Louisiana coastline, possibly. Officially, the forecast brings it to a Cat 1 hurricane. I will tell you, most of our model guidance keeps it just below that level. A couple of them bring it up towards about a Cat 1. Nothing brings it higher than that, which is certainly good news. But this is a quick moving storm. We're talking about some sort of a landfall Saturday night into the first half of the day on Sunday. So be prepared already coming this weekend, Neil.
Holy cow. All right. Thank you very much, Rick. Well, Nate, hasn't even hit us yet. And, well, you know the drill by now, right? 15% of U.S. oil production in the Gulf already shut down as a, precaution. Oil trader Phil Flynn on how that reverberates. What are you looking at here, Phil?
I'm looking at how amazing the U.S. energy industry is and how quickly they react to these storms. And it's one of the reasons we bounced back so dramatically from Hurricane Harvey. This storm could be more of an event where it hurts crude oil production, where Hurricane Harvey was more of a refinery event. So the U.S. energy industry is getting a double sucker punch. First they took out the refineries. Now we have a storm that potentially could lower production. That means that the possibility that these falling gasoline and oil prices that we've seen are going to reverse. We saw that in the futures market today, and we'll probably see it at the pump tomorrow.
All right. Well, what is the procedure with this, Phil? And it's good to remind me, because even if it doesn't prove to be a harmful storm or one that would take out those facilities, out of abundance of caution, the major operators of these refineries, the big oil giants, they shut them down. And the longer that shut down, obviously that freezes production out of the area. Prices go up, right?
It does. And what will happen, of course, because our energy industry is so amazing, a lot of times these storms won't do significant damage, and they will be very quick to bring that production back online. I'm sure there's somebody out in the Gulf of Mexico, what they call an essential person, that has to stay on that rig during the storm. And the only reason he's risking his life to do that is so that he can make sure that the U.S. economy can get that oil back online as quickly as possible. They do an amazing job, Neil. They don't get enough credit. And what usually happens when they bring this production back online, prices come down very, very quickly.
All right. Thank you, my friend, very, very much. Phil Flynn on all of this. By the way, this is among the many reasons we are live this weekend with a special Cost of Freedom, looking at the financial impact of all of this, latest developments from Las Vegas. And this third and final issue, Puerto Rico. It's in a world of hurt after the hurricane. It was already sitting on $74 billion in debt it simply cannot pay. And enter the President of the United States, who said, you know what, that's one obligation they shouldn't have to worry about right now. He was speaking from his heart, and now a lot of those bondholders are saying, you know what, we're going to get kicked in the you-know-what after this. All right, the president wants to let this whole Puerto Rico thing play out, but he created a firestorm yesterday when he was telling our relative there that maybe the time has come for us to acknowledge that after Maria and all the costs of the hurricane and everything else, we just recognize the obvious, and all these big brokerage houses that are on the hook to Puerto Rico to the tune of $75 billion, that debt, just wash it away. It's never going to be paid back. Forget about it. Well, that's one thing, but they need about $90 billion worth of hurricane aid now. So that's a lot of money to wash away, right? What's the fallout from all of this? Mayflower Advisors, Larry Glazer. Now, Larry, smart folks like you remind me the president can't just willy-nilly do that, but he can influence the process. And he was more or less, to me at least, saying the obvious to these debt holders. You're going to get burnt. You just got to live with it, deal with it, and move on from it, right?
Neil, as Americans, we have a responsibility to provide the basics to the people of Puerto Rico: the food, the water, the shelter, the electricity, all the necessities in hurricane relief that we can provide, just like we would to our fellow Americans in Texas, just like we would in Florida. But we also have a responsibility to the next generation of Americans. We already have a $20 trillion debt. Should we borrow money from China and from other countries in order to bail out hedge funds and other institutions who Puerto Rico owes debt to? And in this case, we don't have that responsibility. The hurricane relief alone could cost $100 billion. We're going to saddle that to the next generation. Should we step outside of that box? Should we bail out Detroit? Should we bail out Hartford? Where do you draw the line, and what's reasonable, and how do you set a precedent that's going to happen here with Puerto Rico?
You know what's weird about this, if you think about it, my friend, is that we're hardly the stewards of fiscal propriety, right? I mean, we've got a $20 trillion debt. We're lecturing the Puerto Ricans on their $74 billion debt. And we could just print money. The Puerto Ricans do not have that ability right now. It's not an apologist for them, but it does show you what's really going on. We've got a world of debt going on here, and this one's right in our hemisphere, right in our neighborhood.
You know, look, I feel for the people of Puerto Rico. For a generation, they've been misled. They've borrowed money they could never pay back. People lent the money knowing they could never pay back the debt, which is simply awful. It's bad, failed leadership. It was bad policies. We don't want to make those policies work. We want Puerto Rico to become economically viable.
Yeah, but Larry, if they walk away from that debt for whatever very justifiable reasons, I mean, that's a scarlet letter, and you're not going to get many investors coming running back to you anytime soon.
Look, Neil, they have the nickname of the Greece of the Caribbean, and that's not the nickname that you want. It's not just because they have beautiful palm trees. And it's a really bad situation. You've got to reverse the brain drain. You've got to give people a reason to be in Puerto Rico, grow the economy, help the people of Puerto Rico. Don't bail out the bondholders. That's not the answer here, Neil.
All right, buddy. Thank you very, very much. Always appreciate it. Larry Glazer. Want to let you know on a little bit of tax development here. The Senate Budget Committee has gone ahead and cleared that budget blueprint for tax reform. Next step is a full vote in the Senate, of course. Now, remember, this was the committee that allocated about $1.5 trillion over 10 years for tax cuts. So it factored in that revenue. Now, the proposals on the table are at least $2.5 trillion worth of tax cuts, but they're closer to keeping this moving along here at a lot faster pace than was earlier thought, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why stocks have been racing. These guys are making more progress than many in the markets thought they would on these tax cuts. That is a record for the Dow, in case you're counting. It's like the 780th in a row. I don't know. It's getting ridiculous. A little more after this. All right, just me, but for me, the scariest news and the update we're getting on Stephen Paddock is not why he did it, but other locations where he wanted to do it as well. Apparently in Chicago, even in Boston. Chicago, of course, has a big old marathon on Sunday. Keep in mind, in Boston, they're getting ready for the baseball playoffs themselves. So there's a lot going on here. The former Boston Police Commissioner, Ed Davis, what he makes of this. Commissioner, if it's true that Paddock was scoping out your fine city as well as Chicago, and that there might have been others, he was obviously looking for big crowds. He was obviously looking for a big opportunity. It wasn't even tied to the philosophy of the musical tastes of those crowds, because in Chicago it would have been more like a rock event, and in Las Vegas, a country music event. What do you make of these latest revelations?
Well, it's certainly unsettling to know that he considered Boston, if the reports are true. But beyond that, it helps a little bit in understanding his motivation. As you said, by looking at these different venues, it's not about Vegas. It's not about losing money there. It's not about a particular genre of music. It's about victims. It's about getting a large number of people together in a small area. And so this guy was fixated on killing as many people as he could and was trying to find the best place to have that happen. It shows sinister planning, and it really is unsettling.
You know, I was thinking of you, Commissioner, how well you handled the attack, the terror attack by the Tsarnaev brothers. And early on in the investigation, you said, we will have images of them. Trust me, I think I'm paraphrasing here, sir. You said, we will have images of them. Surely there were cameras that monitored their whereabouts along the marathon route that identified them. I am sure, and it's already, we're getting indications they have similar images Paddock, and of course in a casino where there are lots of cameras on the floor, on the images of him with this other woman Saturday night, the night before the attacks. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there. They're just doing a timeline with that, I would assume, right?
Well, they're doing a timeline, but they're also looking for anybody he might have met with. Did somebody else help him carry suitcases in? Was there something going on at the car that would indicate he was preparing to flee and had a plan in place to get away? There's a number of clues in the video coverage. I've worked with the security people in Vegas for the last 2 years very closely. I've seen the cameras. There's no place in America that has more cameras per square inch than Las Vegas. So,
is that right?
It's absolutely. I mean, there's no question about it. Yeah, and it's going to take time to go through those cameras. Unfortunately, there aren't algorithms for us to go to. We need to review these films frame by frame. So it's going to take a while to look at everything that he did over that 3 or 4 day period.
But you mentioned something profound there, right there, that he might have had a getaway plan. I mean, we do know his car was filled with all sorts of dangerous stuff, a lot of weapons, 1,600 rounds. Stuff that could blow up, sophisticated fertilizer like, Oklahoma City. So he was planning something after this. He didn't.
Those first officers and the security officer that was shot outside his door, that was a pivotal moment in the process here. That caused him to turn his attention to the law enforcement people and to turn his attention away from the crowd. So hundreds of other people could have been killed in this if he hadn't done that. And something about the way that they first made entry into that hallway made him believe that he had to take his life. And I think that was, you know, an incredibly successful operation on the part of security and police there.
Well put, Commissioner. Thank you again. We got to stop meeting on these events to do it. But thank you, sir. Just
unfortunately, thank you, Neil. Appreciate it.
Ed Davis, the former Boston Police Commissioner, Fox News contributor extraordinaire as well. All right, this is something we've discussed again and again after Las Vegas and all of this. So many people open their hearts and their wallets to help out, and I mean really help out. Where do you hear the numbers on this after this?